So Christine Hudson is an artist that works in ceramics, in sculpture, performance, and installation. Their art situates personal narrative as an entry point to integrate discussions of community, of care, resistance, and resilience. Their utilization of objects and space investigate the way visual language can be employed as a powerful tool for archiving histories that are often erased, overlooked, or rendered silent. By highlighting the subtle tensions between the varying degrees of visibility, their practice imagines a rethinking of what preserving these marginalized, untold stories entails, creating a space for healing, remembrance, and empowerment. These explorations prompt viewers to reflect on the enduring influence of history and traditions on our lives and collective consciousness. So, I met Christine Hudson about 12 years ago, right outside of this room. So this is an installation that Christine made, and they're going to talk about it in a few minutes. I remember opening the door and seeing this gallery. It's about this thick of porcelain teeth. And I remember wanting to read the letter on the other side of the room. And I remember walking crunch, crunch, crunch through these porcelain teeth. It's 110,000 porcelain teeth. Christine was in there, this was their senior show as an undergraduate student at Cal State University Long Beach. For the next 2 years, I got to know Christine pretty well when they were doing their post-bac. We ended up connecting in many, many ways. They TA'd for me. They ended up being an assistant for me on a big show I had in San Francisco. And we became good friends, and we became good collaborators. I became a person who saw this younger artist as somebody who had the potential to find their voice and to express their voice and to use their voice for something much larger than themselves. And so that's kind of my very personal relationship with Christine. So when we were looking for somebody who could come up here and teach ceramics this year and sculpture, Christine was on the top of the list. So I'm so happy Christine's here this fall here at Southern Oregon University. So I want to kind of do a few shout outs to some of their kind of what they've done in Los Angeles. So they were born in Long Beach Memorial Hospital. They work in Los Angeles. They teach grad seminars in kind of technical ceramics in the graduate school at UCLA. And they also teach at Cal State University Long Beach where they went to undergrad in graduate and undergraduate courses. They went to UC Irvine for graduate school where they studied with Daniel Martinez, Amanda Ross Ho, and Letitia Perta. And very influential. Additionally, they've been working with so many amazing artists, Tony Marsh, Chris Miles, Anna Sue Hoy, Hyung Mi Shin, Candice Lin, Ruby Neary, Chris Miller, Brittany Mojo, Gerardo Monterrubio, Tia Santana, Dulce Soledad Ibarra, Kim Garcia, Diego Palacios, just to name a few artists who they have worked closely with in all sorts of ways. And so I'm just really happy to introduce Christine Hudson and make them a part of our community here at Southern Oregon University. So, and this hat is a hat that Christine has a matching hat from about 12 years ago. That theirs is even dirtier and grosser than mine. So I just wanted to kind of shout out to this hat and that kind of history of how we become the artists who we become. So please join me in applause for Christine Hudson.
Can everyone hear me okay? Is this pretty good? All right. So I kind of wanted to structure this talk centering around my utilization of narrative and how it's like changed throughout my practice and shifted over the years. I deal a lot with storytelling and like myth making, how that's kind of evolved my relationship with teaching and pedagogy. And so to start, like I'm going to bring it back to this is my undergrad thesis show from Cal State Long Beach, where I went to for ceramics. I got my BFA in ceramics. And then this was a show that wasn't 12 years ago, it was 10. Because it's the 10-year anniversary is coming in October. And this show was kind of lived by. I made 110,000 porcelain teeth by hand over the course of 6 months to cover the floor of the gallery that I blacked out with like kind of blacked out curtains, and then all the way at the very end was this letter at the far side of the gallery. And it was just kind of a clue, that letter was kind of a clue that you're supposed to walk all over these teeth. I made all the different types, so incisors, canines, premolars, and molars, and it was just kind of this long process of like an act of devotion. I was kind of utilizing my labor as a justification as to the importance of the narrative that I was working at, and like to give it more weight, because I think accumulation is one of the easiest ways to show importance and like power in a specific capacity. And so the narrative that I was working with was about a friend. This piece essentially is like a memorial to a friend that I had. Trigger warning for suicide. So I made this piece in the hopes that, actually I'm not gonna be a letter, I'm gonna be I made this piece as kind of a way to promote trans suicide awareness. I had a friend who passed away, and in kind of my grief, I started making these teeth, and then over the course of time, it developed into a project where I wanted to get people to really think about being in a body. So I'm making teeth that you step on in hopes that you connect from your feet all the way to the top of your head, how it feels to exist in the body. I made the letter really didactic. So I really explained like, what is it I'm trying to do with these things, why I made it. I'm not gonna read the letter. If you wanna read the letter, you just come ask me later, and I can show it to you. But in the letter, I was trying to write, I wrote it and addressed it to my friend. And at the same time, I was trying to be like, hey, this is a thing. I wish there was a thing. I wish that we could somehow change like the 50% suicide rate, because that's what it was at the time. And then you walk into the room, not knowing why the heck there are a bunch of these teeth on the floor. You read the letter, it gives you more information as to what is happening, and then you're confronted to walk out with this new information. So it was just a way for me to really promote like a hyper-awareness of being in a body and promote trans suicide awareness. And so that was kind of like my first initial interaction with utilizing like narrative in a very specific didactic learning way. That really kind of, I was like, this is what this is about. Like, that is what it is about. And like the further, or like later on, I really like wanted to think of narrative as a little bit more open. But my initial start, I like used it to like pinpoint and clarify what is this about. And so the second project that I really did that kind of looked at my own narrative was one that dealt with my Filipino identity. I'm Filipino American. And so I made around 900 of these porcelain planes. So I developed this porcelain sheet folding technique at Cal State Long Beach. It's probably going to be the workshop I'm going to do when I do a workshop. So look out for that. But I was able to fold these paper airplanes out of porcelain and then fire them. And then I set up the room in this way. And it was, at the time I was really learning about how colonialism and imperialism was impacting the like Filipino culture and kind of the way that I operate in the world, and how we can still like feel that those reverberations and echoes today, and even though I'm not in the Philippines, I still feel it wherever I'm at. And so it's like thinking about migration, because the title of this is Dysphoria, an attempt at reclamation. And so just like learning about this pre-colonial script called the Bayan, which was that I put on the planes. Like I really wanted to investigate what is a colonized body, how does a colonized body exist, because you can't separate yourself from that. So, like I said, the planes were covered in this pre-colonial script called the Bayan. The Bayan is not a script that is utilized today really that much. There is a resurgence of it, but it's not like, we don't write in that. Like mainly it's used in like calligraphy or like tattoos, honestly. But it's like a kind of a lost script of writing and utilizing this alphabet. I chose to display the planes on these plaster slabs that I created. So, the little white platforms that they're all on, those are the slabs that I use to make the planes. And I just wanted to incorporate the process into the presentation of the piece. So there were all these planes put out in front of you, and I had an thread to like replenish. Because what I was trying to do is I was trying to get people to interact with these planes and to clue people into how I wanted them to interact. I put a plane all the way across the gallery into the wall. And so I just stuck it in the wall because the thing I wanted to get people to do is toss them. So I made all these planes, people went into the room, they saw the planes, and they were kind of welcome to do whatever they want with it. So I was really trying to get people to toss them because I think that's the first impetus when you see paper plane, is like, I'm gonna, that. So I tried to like make it pretty available and clue people in that like this interaction is fine. A lot of people did end up tossing the planes, but also people felt bad about tossing the planes because now you're working with something really precious. And so it was either you tossed them or you took one. And either one is kind of fine because the room was open to whatever the audience wanted. But yeah, I really wanted to work with planes because I was like thinking about migration and like flying is how my parents kind of came to America. And then that kind of utilization of the pre-colonial script in it is trying to think about what is my culture and heritage before colonization happened. And then the decorating techniques I used to, like the color is from underlays that I painted on these plaster slabs or I painted onto the paper porcelain plates themselves. So once they got tossed, they created kind of this end accumulation pile. So this is kind of the end of the show where most of those 900 planes got tossed and shot to the end of the side or to the other end of the room. And I was really, when I first started making this work, I was really thinking about like, oh, it's like going to be about this accumulation of like microaggressions, about my own identity, it's like, what even are you, and kind of questions like that. But I also think that it's kind of about how you are an accumulation of a lot of bits and pieces of different things. So from yourself, from how others will perceive you, from your own culture, from where you exist, from even your lineage. And so it's just thinking about how all of those shards kind of form and pile into this one body. And then another thing I started looking at in terms of like narrative is my lineage. So I wanted to look into kind of like where I came from and the history of my parents. And so I did a piece that's centered around my mom. And so this piece is called La Siciliana, La Corvita, Iloilo, Caligno, Manila, New Jersey, Winter Park. And it's a dresser that's shoved in the corner. It's not the names, because this wasn't a group show. But what I wanted to do is like take someone else's narrative and figure out kind of a work, like how do I like create a work from that. So what I did is I interviewed my mom. She told me about this dresser that she had growing up in the Philippines that doesn't exist anymore. So I was like, okay, I'm going to interview her and then we're gonna try and talk about like the dimensions of this and try and like recreate this dresser, like what does this dresser mean to her? And then at the same time I wanted to talk to her about her migration to California. So I was like asking her questions about like her childhood and like where did she go and where did she like end up, like how did she end up in certain areas. So like La Siciliana, La Corvita, Iloilo, Caligno, Manila, New Jersey, and Winter Park are all locations she called home. So what I learned through this course of this interview was when I got like kind of a sketch of what the dresser looked like. But I also kind of learned a lot about her upbringing and the history and kind of the almost generational trauma. Like it rendered that a lot more visible. So this is just kind of a little bit more of a detailed shot of all the things. So So the dresser itself was made from balikbayan boxes, and balikbayan boxes are these really specific Filipino cardboard boxes. Balikbayan literally translates to return home, and they're care packages. So they're care packages you send back to the Philippines. They're full of like clothes, degree soap is a big one, like anything like Costco bulk that people will need back home. They just put that in there, money, and it's just kind of like, because a lot of the times people who work overseas, the way that people back in the Philippines survive or even get income is kind of dependent on these care packages. So the balikbayan boxes already have, like those cardboard boxes already have a lot of kind of history and almost like lore to them, because there's so much just entrapped within this one specific thing. And then it's also kind of like encompasses this notion of like home. It's like the boxes themselves kind of symbolize comfort that you send back home. And so I thought that making the dresser out of that, because the dresser is something back in the Philippines that symbolizes her house growing up, I thought it was a good kind of parallel to make them out of the line boxes. And then what I did is, on the right, I have a fully typed transcribed interview between me and my mom, and then what's being kind of, I can't really see it because you're not really supposed to see it that well, but what's being projected above it is her voice, essentially. So I had, in the interview, I had her talking about like stories from growing up, and what I did was I chose those narrative bits. I had her write it in her own handwriting, and then I made a very slow scrolling video of those stories. So the reason why I had it be so slow of a scroll is because if you wanted to learn about the piece, you had to spend time with it. So it was a way of being like saying like, you want to know, then you need to take the time and the effort to learn. So I had her write it in her handwriting, but if you couldn't read it, that's why I had kind of the transcript. And I was also kind of working with different levels of visibility. So it's like you have the actual, all the information in that transcript, but then you have kind of a little bit more of an aesthetic and also a little bit more of her voice inscribed within the projection itself. And a lot of the things that she talked about was like, I discovered that the dresser became almost this memento of her mom, because her mom passed away when she was really little, and the dresser was the last thing that she got from her mom. And so it encompassed, like, when she looks at that dresser, it brings up, and she recalls a lot of these, like, memories about her mother. So it's like, how do these objects hold historical narratives? And then within all of those historical narratives, I also saw through the interview and then just her interactions, I saw how there's also trauma attached to it. And so it was like trying to deal with all of that and then create a piece that encompassed all of that. So the biggest thing, like problem solving issue I had was, how do I present a voice that's voiceless? Because it's like, my mom has a silent voice. Like, she went through her whole life, and she probably would have still gone through her whole life not telling me this thing unless I asked her and did this project. Like, the only reason I knew about like all of these problems was because I did this project and I like fully investigated. So like, I think it's like a very cultural, especially as a female immigrant, like it's very much so that you hide the problems that you've gone through so that your the future generation doesn't have to address it. But I think it's like, there's a lot of nuances within trying to give her a voice, because if you give someone who doesn't speak a voice, that you're speaking for that person. So how do I fill a void, right? Because that's what that is, it's a void. How do I fill this void? How do I fill this gap while still maintaining that there is one? And the way that I came up with it was kind of utilizing the architecture of the space to my advantage, and then with the projection. So I purposely chose to be shoved in the corner and not lit that well. I needed it to not be lit that well because I needed to project on it. But also I wanted to create kind of this almost like overlooking, like as a viewer you almost maybe overlook this piece and it's like slightly hidden to kind of highlight that visibility and invisibility. And then I also, with the projection, I wanted it to branch out of the corner. So it was a way, because I was like, well, should I put in sound first? But I think if I put in sound, that's like giving her too much of a voice with some of that. But it's kind of like making it much more present and upfront that you lose kind of that hiddenness of it. So I thought the best way to do it was through her own literal handwriting, projected and lighting the dresser itself. And so that's kind of why I assembled it in the way that I did. And then just to make sure that it's not like super stewing in the sad. I made sure that the projection kind of broke out of the corner. That this is a voice that is not, that can't really be contained. It still is branching out outside of its confinements. Because I was really thinking about like how like hypervisibility, that is a really Western perspective, and so how do I hold space for these gaps of things missing without trying to fill it? And then this is just a little picture of my mom with the dresser, and then I also, during the interview, I was doing sketches. So there's like a faint little sketch of the dresser, right, that I did with the dresser and then her. And then the other thing I did as like a little like nice little tidbit to myself and like my mom, in one of the drawers is actually a photo of my mom and her mom, because the dresser represented my mom's mom. And so the next thing I like really thought of in terms of like how to utilize narrative is kind of place and location. So then I kind of focused more on like, okay, I grew up suburbs, Orange County, like born and raised in Orange County in the suburb area. How has that influenced my personal history and my identity? So this piece is called A Moment of Rest, A Place for Karaoke and Imagined Hope. And I graduated COVID 2020, right 2 weeks before install of this is my piece show. 2 weeks before install was lockdown. So what I was gonna do is I was gonna build an entire porch inside of a gallery that doubled as a karaoke stage and then have karaoke projected across from it. And then because of lockdown, no one could go see the show. So I wasn't about to drop $2,000 to build something that no one could use. So instead, what I did, of building the actual porch, I kind of laid out cardboard because I was going to cover the entire room with cardboard as a way to like archive who used it by getting the traces of their footprints and other means. I kind of blocked out where the porch was going to exist, and then I drew the blueprint of how the porch was going to exist on the cardboard. So it was going to take up that entire room and utilize the back door that doesn't really get used, but so that door does lead to the outside. So I was really kind of looking into in-between spaces and kind of like how to play with in-betweenness. So I was going to make an outdoor space, which is a porch, but then the door for the house of this porch is going outside. So if you go out that door, it's actually the outside. And then this exterior space is on the interior of another room. So there's like kind of this like layering of play on the utilization of space. With the drawing itself, I kind of like made sure that from whatever perspective you're looking at it, that's the way that I drew it. And then all of the cardboard is just miscellaneous cardboard, but the only cardboard that you could see the prints of are the bullet line boxes as another notion and thinking about kind of home. And so across from that was going to be karaoke. And karaoke is basically kind of this archive that I created, and it's whatever you think. So if there is a song that you're like, this is a karaoke song, I have an Excel doc, and people could add to it. But in the karaoke slideshows, I made my own like slideshow thing, and it was just like those standard like slideshows you see with those Magic Mike things. All of the photos from those slideshows are all different porches all across Orange County. So in every city of Orange County, I had like a couple of porch pictures. And then it would just cycle through them. And I was also thinking about how like karaoke itself is kind of another in-between thing. Like it's not the original, it's not quite the cover, it's this other performative in-betweenness. So I liked kind of juxtaposing the porch as a space, as this interior, exterior space against karaoke. Because the porch itself as well, it's like, the way that you use it, it's like an inside, it's like the exterior of your inside, it's still part of your house, but it's also, it's still exterior. And then it's used for safety and security, so it's like, there's a communal like gathering that happen on it, but it also can be very private. So the porch, even as like an architectural space itself, I feel like, is an in-between kind of state. And there's like less of them, in Southern California, because no one has yards and stuff. So it's also becoming this ephemeral kind of location. So that's why I thought that those two together, I was like, yes, those things are equal, or like at least parallel to one another, where I feel like putting them across from one another they play well with one another. And so it's like you're on a stage that is a porch, but then you're also looking at a porch. So there's like a lot of these doubling and visual doubling that happens within the layering of where you are and what you're seeing. And then like karaoke, so this is an excerpt from the Excel doc. I had a little column for like the artist you want, and then the song, and then the other info was optional, just in case you wanted to add your reasoning behind it or any other information behind it. And this kind of became that archive of like, well, what is like queer essentially? It's like how, like, because I wasn't trying to dictate the confinements of what this was. It was like as a community can we come to like our own archive as to what quantifies as this karaoke. And so a bunch of different people added to it. A lot of people did put other info, but most of these are what I had for the other info. And I would pull songs from this that would then get projected. So all of the songs that were projected across were chosen from the karaoke archive list. And then that was also just thinking about like karaoke as another gesture towards how you present a voiceless subject. So during the show, because no one can go see it, I just had it playing on a loop. And that karaoke playing on a loop kind of mimicked another way to present a voiceless subject, because it was just music in the background, but then it had like words that were clearly supposed to be spoken, embedded into the space. And so one of the next pieces that I made, this piece is called For You. It's 365 roses, gold and pink adornments, and then like a spring mattress, like a bed mattress that I took out all the coverings of. And this was more about like a celebration of self. So it was like I turned 30 and I was kind of really enjoying who I was becoming. And most of the time, I think when people see my work, or like when they talk about my work before this one, they're like, you make sad boy art. And I'm like, that's true. But also maybe I cannot make sad boy work. So this is kind of like my attempt at that, because I really wanted to encompass like queer joy. I wanted to like celebrate being like, that I got this far essentially. And like it was like about looking into my past and wanting to give thanks to all of the moments, all of the good, all the bad, all of the things, because they made me who I am today. Like I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for all those things. And I just really wanted to celebrate life. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna doll me up, give me roses. So the 365 roses is like, oh, I'm gonna, a rose a day, essentially. And then the actual meat of the thing, because the roses are a nice little initial, dang, a lot of flowers. So it's like an initial, very surface, wow kind of thing. But the thing to pay more attention to is actually the mattress. Because with the mattress, I put all of these adornments and little tiny detailing done to them that if you didn't look or take time to look at it, you would miss it. And I really wanted to highlight kind of the structure that was holding up the roses. So I really went hardcore, or tried to go hardcore with the pink and the gold, and made all of my little embellishments kind of gold and pink. I tried to make them really intricate, and spread it out all over the place, because I was really, at the time, more so embracing the feminine. Because I look like this, right? And I feel like people are like, that? No. But I'm really when you get to know me and I'm really comfortable with you, I can be stupid sappy. I love being cheesy, but you would not tell with the glaring and the black and the emo-ness. So it was kind of, I utilized the piece to be let me see what happens if I just puke out this other side of me onto it. And I just really wanted to make that container holding up the flowers, just something so much more intricate, because really that's what the piece is about, is the thing. So I don't know if you can kind of tell, but I painted the back rings of the springs. Those are all painted gold and glittered. I wrapped the sides with ribbons. I have all these gold flowers, and it was anything that had gold and linking together that are hoops, because I like hoops a lot. I don't have ears, but I just like hoops a lot. And gold necklaces. There's teddy, there's small little moments. There's these 11/11 pendant that I had both on the bottom and the top. And it was just to get people to try and investigate more, because that was kind of mimicking the way that I felt that I was looking into myself. It's the more time I spend with myself, the more I want to celebrate it. And so that's why the flowers I think are the thing people love, but it's really about the mattress. And I think, and that was just kind of what I was trying to highlight within that work. And then one of the things that came after that was this baby car seat piece that I did. This is called I Prefer Your Love. And so this is stemming from actually a story that my mom told me. So we were on this car ride, road trip. And then we passed through where they used to live in San Bernardino County. My mom was like, oh yeah, did I ever tell you that I got into an accident when I was pregnant with you? And I was like, what? No. And then so she told me, yeah, she spun out on the freeway, and while she was pregnant with me, and some guy had to get out of his car to help turn her car around because she was so frazzled and could not do anything. And then she had to be early. So there was obviously this was a traumatic experience for her. And when she told me that, it kind of blew my mind, because my most reoccurring nightmare growing up as a child is me getting into an accident on the freeway. So I didn't know the whole pregnant accident car story while I was having these nightmares. And when she told me that, I was just like, oh my God, is this generational trauma made visible? And so I had to make a piece about it. And so that's kind of what this comes from, is how do we trace that generational trauma? And how do I present the way that it's influenced my mom and influenced the way that she's cared for me? So the decorations on the car seat are actually from the Messiah Filipino tattoos. So this is the image of a very one of the very popular old school books called the Boxer Codex that has like photos of a lot of Filipino tattoos. This is like Visayas tattoos, which is around where my parents are located. And so I use kind of this imagery and those tattoos and those motifs to decorate the arms of it, because the tattoos are very symbolic. And so that was kind of one instance of like bringing in kind of this protection into it, and then all the other parts of it. So like on the seatbelt buckle itself, like the thing that you put into the buckle, there's a word laway on it, and then on the back of it, on the far right, I carved in para usog, and then there's this pendant. And so all of these aspects are kind of different protective charms and blessings. So para usog is basically go away curse. It's what you tell babies, like it's basically what you say to babies to make sure that you're not giving them bad juju. So you like have a newborn or a baby, you're always like para usog, and then like you laway them. So laway is saliva, and then the saliva acts as a blessing, as another protective barrier coverage to it. And then the way that I set up the seatbelt itself, that gold part is a 3D printed pendant of a blown up version of the Mother Mary pendant for my mom's favorite rosary. So there's like both like old school Filipino plus like a traditional kind of protective charms, but also because usually you're brought up very Catholic as a Filipino. So I wanted to also include that because it's a very important thing to her. And that is kind of how she passes along care. So I wanted to kind of utilize all of these different aspects of the way that my mom likes to protect me. She's always just like, whenever I leave, she's like, okay, be careful, which is crazy. It's not like having a day. It's like, be careful. Because I know that the world can be harsh sometimes. So I want you to go out with care. And so that's kind of what I wanted to encompass by having all these detailings that are about protective charms. And then the tattooing of that went on to the car seat, that's then my next performance. So I did this performance called Deba, right? And it's a 45-minute performance where I painted those assigned tattoos on myself with slip. And the slip was made from clay that I excavated from my own house, sugarcane, because where my parents grew up in Negros, there's a lot of sugarcane, and then my mom's dad is a sugarcane farmer. So sugarcane's like just an abundant thing about that location. And then my saliva, because I chewed the sugarcane and then spit it out. So the slip that I painted on myself is made from those components. And then I wanted to paint my entire body, starting from the bottom up, essentially. And the reason why I wanted to do these tattoos is because when you get these tattoos, it's usually earned. They're earned by doing acts of bravery. So they're like a symbolic kind of representation of feats that you've accomplished or that you've done. And because during the performance what I was doing was I was singing and I was yo-yoing. So I know that, like the big stereotype about Filipinos is that we love karaoke. I don't sing in front of people. So the tattoos are also like me trying to be like, look, I'm doing this brave thing. Help me complete this. Because I was singing Tagalog songs, Tagalog karaoke songs. And then I was also trying to create essentially a ritual. So by painting, by singing, and by utilizing a yo-yo, which is kind of like meditative and kind of hypnotic with the circling and the rolling and the going back and forth, I was trying to like channel my ancestors to give me guidance and thank them for just thank them. I don't speak Tagalog, so like that was like another kind of added to it. It's like you didn't see, like unless you knew the language, you couldn't tell that I didn't know the language. So I was working a lot with that visibility or access to visibility about certain information a lot. And then yo-yoing also is a Filipino thing. Like if you have a yo-yo in front of a Filipino, the first thing they do is like, do you know that yo-yos are Filipino? We invented the yo-yo, which may or may not be true. But one of the ways that it got popularized in America was because of a Filipino man. So Pedro Flores actually is the one who popularized yo-yos in America. He brought it here, he like started a business with it, and then he sold the rights to Dunkin'. So Dunkin' yo-yos came from this guy that no one knows about. So I also like really enjoyed kind of that lore and that myth attached to the yo-yos, also attached to this piece. So I was kind of like utilizing a bunch of storytelling aspects in terms of the process that I was doing while trying to come up, like doing this ritual. And this is kind of the playlist that I started with. I started with the Harana, which is basically what you sing to like woo a partner. And I was trying to like woo my ancestors to be like, hey, please listen to me, give me guidance, and thank you. And it's like kind of this sign of devotion and longing because I'm like trying to do this meditation as a way to connect to my heritage, my roots. This is kind of just a end photo of me all kind of painted up. And I actually like ran out of time. So if doing this performance was one of the hardest performances I've ever done. I've done labor-intensive things. Thinking about this performance always makes me want to throw up. But I know I need to do it again because I need to do it for at least 3 hours. So sometimes you learn things while you do them. And I think that's like kind of a key thing when you're learning about your own artistic practice is learning how to be creative. But that's kind of like a breadth of some of the work I've done currently. Right now, I'm kind of working on these other things. So I'm doing this series concerning, like I started off thinking about support structures at rest. And I made this ceramic sawhorse that is essentially like the size, it's exactly the same size as a normal sawhorse, all made out of clay, add a nice little luster to it, so that's what that gold little embellishment is of the donkey, because the most common one is the one you find at Home Depot, the Mario brand. And so I kind of use that motif and put it in there. And then the other thing that I'm kind of working on right now are these A-frames, which are the same kind of composition as a sawhorse, but instead of the beam going this way, it's going this way. So this is like 2 A-frames that you would put on a road to block traffic, and kind of seeing how, or thinking through how it guides people. They're the main reason why they came into place because of protests. And so kind of thinking about the way that these objects kind of dictate space and dictate the way people use space. So those are kind of just like things that I'm thinking through now and working on right now, but not here because they're big and I did not bring that in my car. But I am going to be working more on these when I get back. But yeah, that's just kind of a
We got time for questions, and if you do have a question, I'm going to hand you the microphone so that the camera can pick up the question you are asking for Christine to answer. Who wants to go first? Way over there. Pass this down the aisle. Will you pass this down for me?
Hello. Okay. I wanted to ask specifically about the performance piece. Because there's so many elements, and I was curious about your process in terms of coming up with one element, why you feel you needed another one on top of that, and another one on top of that, because there's just so many, and I was wondering like how you added all the elements together.
Yeah, so when the first initial thought about this piece was like, oh, I need to sing karaoke in Tagalog because I don't understand the language, and that's where it stemmed from. And then I was trying to figure out ways to I wanted to incorporate more because I needed to make it more like a ritual, and I felt like just doing the singing and the painting wasn't enough. Plus, it was a way for me to take breaks. A lot of the things in my performances, one of the things I really like to try to highlight are that breaks are essential to the performance itself. And so yo-yoing is another, it's kind of more of a pause moment, a way to like promote that I'm taking a break from trying to do the harder thing. And I really like how the lore of the yo-yo, because it's also yo-yo, I think as a translation means to come back. Because it stems from like also a Filipino word. And so I kind of like those parallels. So I like to utilize things that have like, maybe they're not completely crossing, but they're like existing in tandem with one another.
Thank you. Next question all the way over there. Oh, too fast.
Hi, Christine. Can you hear me? I'm wondering if you can elaborate on the labor-intensive part of your practice, and like I'm specifically curious about like, is the labor-intensive part of your practice, is it like enjoyable or is it painful? Like, and maybe if you could speak to like putting yourself in these like uncomfortable positions with like sensation, and like if that's something that you're thinking about, or is that important to you, or is that just kind of like a byproduct of what's happening?
Yeah, my attachment to labor is like another thing that I like to talk about. I didn't really go into it here because the time slot is so short, but I really think about labor and how it has a lot of, it can be really visible in some capacities and really invisible. And so when I started, I really was focused and fixated on like showing that physical like act of devotion, because I was like, how do I prove that this is something worthwhile? But I think that's also like stemming from being in my 20s and feeling really reactionary. I put my body through hell making this. Like, I would never do this again. It was 6 months, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I think I only took breaks 6 days. And it was the most painful thing I've ever done in terms of physicality. I like ruined pretty much my hands. Like, I have to go to an occupational therapist to have them straighten my hands because of this project. But at the moment and at that time frame, I'm like, this is the only way that I can really showcase the power in wanting to memorialize my friend. And then like, that's why with my performances, I try to incorporate breaks into them, because breaks are part of the piece. One of the pieces that I've done is I punch out 700 pounds of clay to conform to my studio. And in that, I like was laying on the ground sometimes. I was just like exhausted, but it was because I wanted to highlight like that labor. Usually what happens with my performances is that I'm dependent on the care from others. So I did an embroidery piece, people brought me food. And even in that punching clay piece, people brought me food, they left it outside the door, because I'm trying to get the viewer to care. So it was also like putting myself through these painful things to hope that you want to care for the thing that's going through pain. But recently I really wanted to look into like more like better ways to take care of my body, because I would like to utilize it as much as I can. And think about how to do that in a more healthy balance. Because I think there's a lot of power to endurance-based performance art, for sure. But I think like sustainably, you can only do so many before you're done. Yeah.
Thank you, Christine. Other questions? One and then two.
For when you made your piece with the airplanes where you wanted the audience to interact with it, was there a part of you that was scared about that? Because I know that if you were to make something and put so much time and thought into it and then sort of relinquish control to it, that would be creepy to me.
No, I don't care. Because I knew that going in, I'm also really not precious with my work. I think working in ceramics, you learn to accept failure a lot and kind of roll with the punches. And I also knew that I was making these to break for the most part. And it was more about the mechanism, like I was more excited about the activation of throwing than I was about these objects themselves. And I feel like that's always like a tension you have when baking. It's like, oh, this is a thing, it's very precious to me. But at the same time, I'm always like, I can make it again. I can make those things again if I really want to. I'm not going to, but.
There was a question over here. Can you pass this down, please?
Thank you.
So in creating like the car seat and that like highlights generational trauma, do you think that creating it helped you to like heal your generational trauma and release the like subconscious pain that you held?
I feel like the one, like, I guess, yes and no. So the specific nightmare attached to it hasn't happened in a long, long time. So I feel like the car seat didn't need to be created for that. But I think it, like that piece and then the dresser, I feel like absolutely, because it made me realize just how much and in what capacity and the nuances of how I'm, like the way that I was brought up with my mom. Like, it made me care for her more. I'm just like, wow, I think these pieces show that I really like my mom. And I think like, there obviously is a processing that happens when you make work. And I feel like it's still existing today. I don't think it ever goes away. I think it just comes in different types of intensity and different capacities.
Thank you. Other questions? Last call. There we go.
I know that you talked about like over the span of 6 months with the teeth, you kind of realized that you wanted to make it a project, but before that point when you were just making the teeth to make the teeth for like grief, I was wondering why teeth exactly? Like, I know that it was for the body, to like connect with the body for the project, but kind of before that.
Yeah, so it actually, the more that people ask me about why teeth, I'm just like, I kind of looked down on it. It was like a year before my thesis show, basically. And I was making this panda head, and the way that you can make really nice teeth is by making them separately and putting them into the thing instead. And so I was just like trying to make teeth for that, found out my friend passed away, and it was like my #1 coping mechanism. And then for a couple of months, I did not know what to do with them. And then one day I was like, no, I think I know what I should do with them. And honestly, the whole like getting people to think about how they are in their body from their foot to their head, that came after the fact. Me discovering that came after I created it. So that's like a pretty good example of like, you don't need to know all the answers when you're making the thing. Sometimes you discover it, and sometimes you discover them years later. But it was just like this, it's a thing that I'm trying to train, and I think I've trained really well, is to know when my instincts are correct. Because a lot of the times, they create patterns, they line up really well. So that's, I think, one of the, it's a thing I try, and a skill that I try to hone.
Thank you, Christine. Can we get one more round of applause?